to the Wandering Creatives podcast. I'm your host, Allie, and joining me on today's episode is Lauren Hooper of Lauren Lights. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I am so excited to be here.
Yes, I honestly cannot express how excited I am to have you on the podcast. I met you, I think we met on Instagram because we had a mutual friend, and then I stumbled across you at a market. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know her virtually. And we're friends on Instagram. And so then we finally met in person, and now you're on the pod, which is amazing. And I have to say, one of the main reasons I'm so excited to have you on is because you have built a tremendous business that is focused on and around creativity. And it's really amazing what you've been able to do. And when I say business, I'm talking you have courses, you do creativity retreats and art retreats, and you have a podcast, and then you're also a maker and make jewelry, I think primarily earrings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also fiber art. So you do it all.
Yes, which is a blessing and a curse. Yeah.
Right. I'm always so amazed by people who can just just do so much and can still function. It blows my mind. But to get things started, Lauren, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and how you got started with Lauren?
Yes. So my story literally goes all over the place. I originally grew up in South Carolina. And when I decided it was time to go to school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew I liked art and I knew I liked helping people. And at that time, I didn't know what art therapy was, and no one told me about it. So I went in as a double major, and I was a social work and art major, or maybe interior design, because I wasn't a fine artist. And so I didn't know what I actually could do as an artist. And then quickly it became clear that was a thing to double major in those. So I just dropped the art and just went into social work, and I loved it. But my room in college was always super decorated. I had a sewing machine in my room, and I was always crafting and making stuff. And people were always coming to me for their crafty needs whenever they needed to make something for class or for their room or just for them personally. And in the summers of college, I would work these traveling children's camps, and I would teach art, and I would get to travel and hang out with kids all day and meet new people. And it was just incredibly fun and something that only young people can do. I'm way too old now. It's exhausting. And so I was just always creative, always creating stuff. And I also just love social work too. And so when I graduated, I got my master's, I got married. So I moved to Georgia from South Carolina, and I got a job in social work as a school social worker, and just immediately could come home and go to my craft room. And because I always had a craft room at home, and it just slowly started. I started a blog. I started making friends online. I started getting featured on other blogs, and I was primarily scrapbooking at the time. Though, like I said, I could sew and paint and just do all kinds of just random things. And my blog just grew a little bit. And then I had an idea for a business, and it just happened. And then we moved overseas. So then we lived in Korea for 3 years. And so I was a school counselor there in Korea for 3 years and working on this business on the side, and it just growing and growing. It was an online art education business. And finally, at the end of the 3 years in Korea, I decided that it was time I could go full-time with this business, and we were going to move again also. So we moved to the Middle East, and we lived there for 3 years, and I did my business. And the first year there, I realized I was miserable. I was all alone all the time. I'd gone from having 500 kids every day to now being at home alone. We're in a new place. We were living out in the desert outside of Dubai. So we were super secluded, and it just wasn't what I thought it was going to be to have an online art business. I was just managing other people, and I was working on the computer all the time. And the business had grown so much that I had essentially worked my way out of being the main artist and it to the manager. And so I was like, well, this is not fun. So I sold that business, and then I launched the retreat business because I was lonely and wanted to make stuff in person with people. And so I ran a couple retreats, and then the pandemic hit. So that's kind of how we got to where we are today. Because of COVID, we had not planned to come back to the States, but there was just nowhere for us to go. So we moved back to Asheville a little over a year and a half ago. And I had access to shipping, to reliable shipping now. So I started my Etsy shop. And I was teaching online classes still through the pandemic to get me through. And then this past year, my husband's a music teacher. So then this past year, he got offered a job here in Raleigh, which is how Allie and I connected. And so he had 2 days to move. And so we're good at moving. And so we got it done. And so here we are again. And slowly, as the world's opening back up, I am picking back up on retreats. So that's how I got from where I started to where I am now, with a lot of kind of twists and turns in them. And so who knows what the future will hold.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, you have been everywhere. That is awesome, but also I imagine very stressful. I'm also, while you were talking, I was also just thinking of having to pack up like your craft room every time you move, and all, because I don't know, I would think you would want to buy everything every time you moved, and so you try to take as much as you can with you. But I also know, like, moving overseas, you can't necessarily do that a lot. Yeah, in my mind, that's just a lot of stress.
Yeah, it is. And it's good for cleaning out, because every time we move, I realize stuff I don't need, but it's also so sad because, as a crafter, you're like, I might need this random piece of wood one day. I need to take it with me. So that's always what I'm trying to like balance out, is how to have a little bit less, but still have what I need. And yeah, I've had to essentially restock a lot of my craft stuff during most of our moves, because you also have to think, like, you can't ship oil paints in shipping containers because they're a fire hazard. So it's a lot of figuring stuff like that out. And depending on how you're shipping stuff, if you pay per weight, you can't move a bunch of paper in boxes, which is mostly what I have, is paper and books.
That's good to know. Those are things I would never think of.
Yeah. So it's a lot of logistical stuff that you wouldn't think about as a crafter, that when you move a lot, you have to start figuring out.
Yeah. All right. Good news is I do plan to have Lauren on my other podcast, the Fun with Friends podcast, to talk about her travels and how to be creative while you're traveling and moving around. So we might get a little bit more into kind of the packing and purging of taking crafts with you when you're moving around and traveling. So I'm interested to kind of continue that conversation on the other pod. We're doing crossovers within my own, but you're like super crafty. It sounds like you do kind of everything, or you enjoy dabbling in a variety of crafts. What kind of got you started? Was it a way, well, you said even in college you were super crafty. Do you come from a super kind of creative family, or was it just you were like, I got to do something to decompress at the end of the day, so I'm gonna craft?
Yeah, it's a combination of all the things. My mom is really crafty. She was a consultant for Creative Memories. So if you remember that, you had to be like a kid in the 90s to remember that. And so she sold scrapbook materials, and she is ultimate scrapbooker. That's where all of her money goes. She has a scrapbook room. It's like a whole thing. My dad is a carpenter, so he builds things. I was always the kid who had the most amazing projects because my dad would build things for me for school. And then my mom would help me like decorate it with like intense art supplies. But it just was something in me. As a kid, that's what everyone got me, was always the craft kits that come in the box. And it just, one of those things, it just comes out of me. There's no way I can't not do it. So even when we're like traveling and I don't have any art supplies, I will find a way to make something, or go to a dollar store and buy something to make, or I'll spend an hour collecting different color rocks and arranging them to take a picture of them because I need to do something creative. And so it's just part of who I am.
Oh, I love that. How did you get started with or I guess, what was it about creating like fun and quirky earrings, and even your like wall hangings? I don't know, like your color, I don't know, theory, or like the palettes and the colors you use are just amazing. I love seeing how people kind of like, how people do that, like pick the right colors. I don't know. I'm always like, because I always doubt my own color choices. And I don't know, because I think my eyes are weird. I'm like, does this work together? Is it hurting people's eyes? I'm not quite sure. But what was it that drew you into colorful earrings and why?
They always say you create the thing that you wish existed. And I like to call my style like art teacher vibes. It's very like quirky, very like primary colors, very bright and colorful, and not what my mom would wear to work kind of things. But as a elementary school counselor, it's exactly what I wore to work. And anytime someone would be like, "Oh, you're like dressed like an art teacher today, Miss Hooper," I would be so like thrilled. And so you can see that I probably should have been an elementary art teacher or an art therapist if someone had told me what that was. Anyway, so that's kind of like where I draw that inspiration. And it's based on like right now I'm wearing like a tie-dye yellow shirt. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of visioned before I even put this shirt on today. I was like, ooh, some like kind of yellow tie-dye looking earrings would be cool. And then I like chose this shirt and I was like, oh, I don't have earrings that match it. So sometimes it comes out of like stuff that I directly need or stuff that I think would look good. Right now I'm working on a new collection called Shapes, and it's all very art teacher vibes. It's very primary colors and very funky shapes. And so it's all very solid. So like I said, what you would see your art teacher hanging on the wall in elementary school to help teach kids about primary colors. And so that's where I get a lot of ideas, is from that genre.
I love that. I'm also picturing Miss Fritz from the Magic School Bus. I'm like picturing those vibes in earrings. And I'm like, I think that's close to
That's exactly it. I have a very certain pair of earrings. They have a very like kind of Nickelodeon vibe, and everyone's, those are like Miss Frizzle earrings. That's always like the highest compliment that I can get.
Oh my gosh, I love it so much. And when it comes with the fiber art, because you do wall hangings, which bring me so much joy. I love like some of the like my favorite Instagram accounts I follow are people who just make wall hangings because it's so beautiful. And I love, again, seeing all the like colors that you can play with and the different textures and just putting it all together to make these beautiful kind of abstract landscapes almost. It's just fascinating. When it comes to the wall hangings that you do, are those inspired by anything in particular? Or again, is it like color, you're just like, I gotta play with this and build off of it?
Yeah, sometimes it is based on color, and sometimes it'll be based on yarn. I see a lot of times they are based on nature. So I did a whole mountain series. The one behind me is an ocean scene. So the ocean inspires a lot of my work for sure, because it's just so beautiful and ever changing and has so much, depth and texture, and you can just never quite capture it. And everywhere you go, the ocean looks different. Every time you go to the ocean, it looks different. And so being able to like constantly figure out how to capture that is really fun.
I like that. I do the same with my with a lot of my digital artwork, and like stickers and illustration are ocean based, because it's how could you not? Also, it's just so calming to be near the ocean to me. So I feel that inspiration. So I want to talk a little bit about your business, because again, you have really been able to be like, okay, I am a creative, I'm a maker, but I also like to teach and I like to help people. So how can I build this business around these different aspects of my creativity? And you've really managed to do that with, is Lauren Likes the actual name of your full business? Okay, great. Just want to make sure. And you managed to do that with Lauren Likes. Can you give us a little bit more information about kind of the different aspects, like the retreat and your products, which we touched on already, but you also have a podcast and again, teach courses. You do everything. And I'd love to hear just a bit about each one, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I changed my business name to Lauren Likes was because I kept liking different things and I couldn't pick just one thing I liked. And I know in the business world, they're like, you have to niche down and you can only do one thing. And it's true. If you want to be really successful, like having one thing that you do is the easiest way to do it. But if you can't quite pick one thing because you like a lot of stuff, there is space for figuring that out and putting all of those things together, because they do come down to one essential idea. And I say that I help people live a joyfully creative life. I don't really work in like the business sector. I am not really trying to teach people to be professional artists. Like, I just want you to like buy some watercolor next time you go and try them, or wear a funky pair of earrings and see if that helps you express your creativity. So just finding a way to bring it all together has been really helpful. And I think that's what people enjoy, is seeing people live a normal life just like them and do these creative things, because I follow so many artists who are just so insanely talented. And I'm like, I can never paint like that. And I'm never going to spend the time to learn to paint like that, but I can for sure teach someone to make a wall hanging with some yarn. So that's really like fun and encouraging for me. And that's why I teach so many of the classes. So I have a watercolor class, a weaving class. One of the big things that I love to do is document and take photos. So I have a bunch of photography and storytelling classes, but I also have a class that combines the photography and the art. And so I teach you like 10 or 12 different ways to use the photos you've taken in different, like a bunch of different art mediums to turn them into art. So I teach you how to paint a landscape, I do the exercise where you like use half the photo, you draw the other half of the photo, you like collage, use your actual photos in a collage, because they're not so precious anymore. Back when my mom was scrapbooking, they were really precious. And when my grandmother was scrapbooking, they were so precious. But now we have a million photos on our phone and we can print them for 2 cents. Why not print them and use them in your art? Because then it's combining these great experiences you've had with your now experience of creating something, and you can hang it on your wall or leave it in your journal, whatever you want to do with it. So that's a lot of what my classes are focused on. And my retreats are very similar. I call them like affordable luxury, because it's all inclusive, because I hate those retreats where people are like, oh, the retreat's $700. And then you have to either get your own housing or you have to choose their housing, and it's not nice housing. And it's another like $1,500 or $2,000. And then you have to leave the craft room to go find food somewhere in this random city you've never been before. So my retreats are completely all inclusive. The price is what it is. It's all you spend. And I have a private chef who comes in and cooks for us and teach us different like cooking skills. And at the last retreat, like she taught us how to make like avocado roses, really simple things, but it's just furthering your creativity within your cooking. I have artists, or I will teach workshops. I provide all of the supplies, and we just create for a whole week together in a beautiful location. It's always on the water. We go on adventures and I take you all these places, because I essentially realized I wanted to be like a crafty travel planner, because I love to travel and go places and create these experiences and recommend good food for people and teach art classes, obviously. And so I was like, I could just put all of that together, and then I get to just hang out with cool people who I already know I like, because they're crafty and adventurous. So that's how the retreats work and how they came about. Then I have the Etsy store, and then last is the podcast. I was like, you asked about so many things, but it's, when people ask me what I'm doing, I'm like, what I do today. Right. But the podcast is called How She Creates. So it's the only thing that's not named Lauren Likes, because I started it a long time ago. And I didn't want to change the name. One of my small claims to fame is that it was in Flow magazine one time. The podcast was, and it's like my favorite magazine in the whole world. So I was like, I guess I can't ever change the name in case someone searches it. But I interview different creative people about living a creative lifestyle. I have a series that I'm really passionate about that I love called How She Creates Good. And so I interview different women who are creating good through their creativity. So I interviewed Art Feeds, which is an art therapy type program. I've interviewed interior designers who have helped create retreat centers in Thailand for women who have been trafficked to come and create and have a safe space for healing and learning and creating. So, people who work in fashion, but in slow fashion, not fast fashion, and different things like that. People who are using their creativity to create good in the world. I also share creative challenges that are short and easy, just different things that I've learned about my creativity. So the podcast is just, I like it. It's very similar to this. I like to think of it as like a little nice home for learning about creativity and growing your creative mindset and encouraging you to be more creative. And you can listen while you create.
I was listening to it yesterday, actually, the day before we're recording this. Yeah, I had some work to do, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to put on Lauren's podcast and I'm just going to listen to it while I work on my computer. And it is perfect for getting pumped about like just being creative. So I'm obviously a huge fan of podcasts like, because I don't know. But yeah, it is insane the amount of stuff that you do. It's so impressive. And the retreats sound just so lovely. I feel like they probably just like refresh your soul when you're done being there. And yeah, they sound amazing. I may have to go because they sound, I don't know. Yeah, I'm like, I don't even have words because in my mind, I'm picturing like a lake with in a wooded area with a wonderful house with a big porch and just like chilling with people and like knitting on the dock or something. Like that's what I'm picturing in my mind. And it just sounds so lovely.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The location that I've done some art is called Camilla Palms, and I've got it booked again for the fall. So maybe
nice.
May or June, I'll have another retreat open for the fall. So be on the lookout for that.
Okay. And in the fall too, it's going to be beautiful. Okay. Yes. Keeping my eyes open for that. So you mentioned this a little bit earlier that like when you first started your creative businesses or your art business, like the one that you sold before you started Lauren Likes, and then you had to start over. And I guess I'm just curious, like how has the growing process been for you? It seems like it's happened like fairly naturally, just going from the blog to actually probably like the podcast to the blog to everything else has been maybe a natural progression. But have you ever been overwhelmed or just like, what have I gotten myself into? And yeah, I'm just curious about what the process has been like.
I think one of the keys to success in this kind of business is having ADHD and getting medicated for it. So that's really a lot of what it comes down to. Is it's not necessarily that I was like, oh, this is a great business plan. I was like, oops, I started another new business. Oops, I like started another new hobby and craft, and I need to find a way to pay for it. So yes, it comes with a lot of mental and emotional breakdowns. I have a lot of stuff, a lot of clutter, and it really gets to me because I have so many crafts to do, and I do markets and retreats and events and all of these things. And so it really adds up really quickly. It can get really overwhelming. And the same thing with like daily planning and figuring stuff out. I have to work really hard at planning and just staying on top of myself as a very distracted person. It is really difficult. The past few weeks, I've had a hard time because I have been promoting a retreat. And then I've been working on a new collection and trying to clean out my craft room. And it was just too many things at one time. I was like, I've got to just focus on one thing at a time, but then I have all these other ideas and it's so difficult. So it really is a constant like balance and shift and push and pull of what's going to get my attention today. And unfortunately, a lot of it is whatever's most interesting today and looks most fun. And so that kind of leaves a lot of the work to pile up at the end. And I'm doing stuff late at night and last minute, which is just a problem that I've created for myself a lot of the times. But it's also what happens when you do a lot of different things. And so the podcast is not running right now. I have a list of episodes I'm hoping to find some time to record in the next few weeks. That's been on pause right now, but I just closed the retreat. So now I am fully focused on clay. And so I'll be making new jewelry for markets and a spring collection. And then over the summer, we'll be traveling for the full summer. So I won't be able to really work on anything else. So I'm going to take my loom, my travel loom, and I'll just be weaving all summer. I won't be taking customs. I'll just be creating. My plan is to create based on each location that we go on. So at the end, I'll have a collection based on like a road trip series of US locations.
I love that idea. That is brilliant. That is such a great idea to do. So good. Oh my gosh. But yeah, I also 110% feel everything you're saying about like ADD and yeah, doing the thing that like appeals to you the most. And then at the end of the day, you're like, oh, now I have to do all these quote unquote adulting things. And like the struggle is real. And so it's like having to, I don't want to say tamper down your creativity, but yeah, when you're like constantly coming up with new ideas or new things that you want to do, but you already have 20 things going, and then you have to be like, okay, I want to do this, but in reality, can I do it or should I do it? And I don't know, there's always like a little piece of me dies a little inside when I'm like, later, maybe later I'll be able to to add you to the plate of things I need to get done. But yeah, figuring out how to manage all of that can be difficult sometimes.
It has. And it's taken a lot of trial and error too, and figuring out how I work best and what that looks like. And that's why I found like Etsy works best for me. And people are like, oh, Etsy's awful and takes all your money and blah, blah, blah. You don't have control. And I'm like, I don't need control. I can't handle control. If I have I have been redoing my website for 3 years now. I can't do it. Like it's not in my physical power to run my own shop site. So Etsy does everything for me, and that works amazing for me. And so I can wait. Like this morning, I woke up excited to make those yellow tie-dye earrings. So I just did, and I'll be able to put them on Etsy, and it's just done instead of me having to create all of these extra things outside of what I created, because I don't love being on the computer. So however, whatever system I can find to do that for me is really helpful. And so Etsy works really well for that. And so I feel like I have finally found the thing that fits for me. So if I have an idea to create a new journal, I can do that and put it on Etsy. If I want to create, right now I'm about to launch cups, I can sell those in my Etsy, and it just all makes sense and it all goes together. And I don't have to start another new business or create another new web page. It just all fits in together. And it took me a long time to figure that out, that this is just what the thing that I need to do. And it's just easier this way. And so I think that's what a lot of creative business is, figuring out how you work best and what you want to create, and then what's out there already that supports that, instead of you trying to do everything on your own because some big person online said, this is the system you have to use.
Yeah. And getting overwhelmed by all the people out there going, hey, do this, do that. Yeah. Finding that thing that works specifically for your type of system, like brain, and also work like system is super, super important. So I guess besides finding a system that works for you, what other maybe tidbit of advice do you have for creatives that are looking to build businesses around their creativity like you've done? Like what is a good maybe like first step or action that they can start taking to start that process?
I think if you are just getting started or you haven't started yet, I always tell people just start sharing, just start writing a blog, sharing your ideas, start an Instagram, share what you're making, get feedback, start building that audience. That's the biggest thing. People want to perfect everything behind the scenes first and then be like, okay, world, here it is. And I'm definitely guilty of that too. I'll work on something behind the scenes and then I'll share it one time and be like, why didn't anybody buy it? And especially if you're starting from nothing, like you can't do that. You have to start sharing your stuff before you're ready. I can do that a little bit because I have an audience, a customer base, and I've started to figure out how Etsy works well with that. But if you're just starting out, like you're not going to have any sales and that's going to be so disheartening. But if you go ahead and start sharing, take a picture every single day of whatever you're doing and share it. And you can talk about your art or you can talk about what you watched on TV. It doesn't matter in the caption, but just doing that every day to start building that consistency and that habit in you, because also product photography is like the most important thing we can do when we're selling our art online. So just going ahead and starting to practice that is really important, and doing that daily is what it is. So whatever it is you want to do, if you want to write, start a blog, if you want to share your art on Instagram, whatever works best for you, but just start. And I think if you're a little bit into it, I would always encourage people to get into some kind of mastermind or find some kind of accountability group where you have other creative people like you that I can talk to and ask business questions of and get your opinion and see, what is your Instagram doing? Does this make any sense to you? Am I the only one? And it's so nice to not be alone in those, for you to be like, yeah, my Instagram's awful right now too. And I'm like, okay, it's not me. Everybody doesn't hate me. It's the algorithm. Or be like, should I do this? Is this a good move? And have people encourage you or be like, maybe think about this. And so those are my two things, like start sharing now and find other creative people that you can talk to, because your friends and family are wonderful, but they don't get it and they don't understand what you're talking about with Instagram or why you're worried about Instagram. Or of course they think this is a good idea, or of course this is a terrible, risky idea. And you need someone else who's also in it to give you that good feedback and advice.
Great words of advice. Yes. Thank you so much. Those are, I'm like, also things that I need to do, even though I have my business up and going. So yeah, just a good reminder. And finding your people and like building your community is definitely important, because like you said, you can talk to like your family and friends and they'll be like, they'll try to give you advice, but they really have no idea what's going on in like the world that you're living in. So finding other creatives that you can brainstorm with and run ideas with is, it's honestly, it's like one of the best things I found so far about the art and like maker community, especially where we are in like Raleigh and rural area. Everyone is just so amazing and so willing to like just sit down and be like, yeah, let's talk about what you're doing with your art and let's see what we can do together. So that's just great advice. Really good advice. Is there anything that you're currently working on that you'd like to share with listeners? Do you have any upcoming retreats or markets that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so I'm working on the new shape collection. So hopefully it should be out. So we're recording this in March. So hopefully it should be out by the end of March, and there should still be stuff in my Etsy shop by May. And if it goes great, I'll definitely restock it. I love to do that. I am also working on a new line of nature scene earrings. So I have some Blue Ridge Mountain earrings right now. They are my most popular things I've ever made ever. And I love them. I'm so proud of them. So I'm going to expand the line out and have some different mountain scenes, some oceans, some deserts. So hopefully by May, there are a couple of those in my Etsy shop. Also, and you can shop in person. I am around at some of the Raleigh night markets. So I will be there some if you're in the area. And so then in June, we are going across country in our camper. So I got nothing past May.
So amazing. It's going to be so fun. I cannot wait to hear about your summer RVing across the country and to see some of that you do while you're out there. It's going to be, I can't wait. If folks want to follow along with what markets you have coming up and probably some of your RV trip, where can they?
The best two places are Instagram, of course. I am Lauren Likes Art on I can't get Lauren Likes Art. Whoever has Lauren Likes Art, please respond to my messages. I am Lauren Likes Blog on Instagram, and I am there every single day, always sharing Laszlo, my adorable puppy. I am sharing what I'm working on, sharing tutorials, creative tips for you. I'm here to talk about TV shows. I love to watch TV. So please tell me what TV show you're watching. And then my newsletter is the very best way to stay up to date with everything. It is just go to lauren-likes.com/newsletter and you'll get some discount codes. You'll get a weekly creative challenge and journal prompt for you. So it'll have a little creative lesson. And then it'll have at the bottom any new releases I have in Etsy, any upcoming markets I have, any upcoming retreats, all that kind of stuff. So it is full of goodness every week. And those are the best places to be.
And I will, of course, include all of Lauren's information in the episode description so that you can find her on Instagram easy and sign up for her newsletter. And with that, Lauren, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It has been a blast talking to you, and I can't thank you enough for sharing your story and your insight and knowledge. It's, thank you so much. It's amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really fun. I can't wait to meet your community.
Yes. And for the listeners, I would like to thank you for tuning into today's episode. If you have questions or comments for me or for any of my guests, which includes Lauren, you can call or text us on our hotline, 252-419-6004. And we will include them on a future episode of the podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at Wandering Creatives Pod. Okay. Be sure to like, rate, and review the podcast. Stay creative. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Wandering Creatives Podcast, a CEI media production. Please like, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast as it helps us greatly. You can follow us on Instagram at Wandering Creatives Pod and on Facebook at Wandering Creatives Podcast. If you would like to support the podcast, you can become a Patreon for just $5 a month. The link is in the episode description.